was micromanaged and my father was emotionally absent. As a 27-year-old female now, I understand my mom because I know how evil and abusive my dad was to her. It was a summer vacation of the mid-2000s. I was woken up groggy by my 4-year-old brother one afternoon from the longest nap ever. You know, the kind of naps that make you forget what time and what year it is. I was frustrated, but I knew it was time for him to get his milk. My mom had went to see my grandmother who had just had surgery. My mom usually keeps his food prepped. I just had to warm it up to give it to him. After lying in bed for just a few more minutes, I headed to the kitchen. There she was, prepping his food. At first I felt bad, knowing it was supposed to be done by me, and she had to come back earlier, leaving Grandma. But something was not right. I noticed that whatever formula there was, she was putting just everything into one meal. And she was so fast, like she was urgent. But also I remembered that the food was already prepped by her before she left, so my brain was still restarting from that coma of a nap, and I was really confused. I called out to her, "When did you come back, and why didn't you wake me up?" She faced me, and her face was so angry. I am used to her anger issues, but this was a face I was looking at for the first time. What was she so angry about? I can't exactly pinpoint it, but the shape of her face wasn't usual. Maybe the nose or the jaw or just the eye placement, but something was either too big or too small. "Let me help you," I said. She didn't respond, and instead started stirring the feeder bottle so hard that the milk was splashing everywhere while her body was still and looking at me without even blinking. I looked at her face and saw that the face was getting more unfamiliar, especially the eye placement. After that, all I remember was my heart was pounding so hard that I could almost hear it. I just grabbed my brother from the living room and ran. We had a huge front yard where we had another part of the house rented out by a family. I asked the lady there if we could stay till our mom got back, and she was more than happy. I called my mom from their landline and asked when she was coming back. She came back after 2 hours, and I was reprimanded so hard because the kitchen was a great mess. I don't know to this day if it was just my groggy brain or if I was just too traumatized by my mother to realize that my brain was making up scenarios. Maybe it was me who messed up the kitchen. Maybe I was trying to cope so that I didn't feel guilty, because I was always made to feel guilty at the slightest inconvenience that occurred at our house. Well, that's sort of terrible that you had to live that way. I'm sorry. But also, I think you encountered a mimic, because I see a lot of these mimic stories, and a common theme in that is like their face was like 98% right and like just a little bit not right. So that sounds exactly like what you went through. Ugh. Mimic stuff is so spooky, 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 spooky. Next. sister and I were able to hide underneath it, and some toys could fit under there, but an adult wouldn't. I was setting up a scene between my Bratz dolls and the Beanie Babies when something underneath it caught my attention. I very distinctly remember something grabbing my ankles and pulling me off my feet. I remember hitting the carpet and being dragged under the bed into the pitch blackness, but it felt like being pulled off a cliff into a massive empty pool of black. The next thing I remember, I stood in my bedroom yelling at my dad that pulling me under the bed wasn't funny. And weirdly, I remember it felt like I'd woke up in the middle of the sentence. He obviously asked me what I was going on about, and very confusedly had to explain that it wasn't him, and decided I must have fallen asleep and dreamt it. According to my dad, he heard me screaming and came upstairs to see what was wrong. Came into my bedroom and found me standing in the middle of my bedroom, freaking out at him for pulling him under the bed. My dad was a pretty typical dad joke humor kind of guy. He'd jump out at us from behind the doors and poke us during scary parts of movies and pick us up and carry us around by our ankles. So I guess in my kid brain, it just made sense that I thought it was him. I don't remember what else happened that night, but I'm pretty sure I slept in my mom's bed because I was so freaked out. The under the bed situation. Just super scary, and being pulled underneath there. I can't imagine. Okay, that's not great. Next. This story took place in March of 2019. Me and my friend, who I'll call Alex for privacy reasons, asked me to sleep over at his house for a night or two. Shit hit the fan with my parents, and I don't mean they kicked me out. We just argued a lot and never got along. Since I knew my parents wouldn't take me, I figured I would just walk, since it's only a 15-minute walk. Me and Alex were playing Grand Theft Auto 5 down in his basement when we heard a woman-like scream from outside. Alex froze, and so did I. Alex said we should go into the woods the next morning because there was an abandoned house over there. At the time, we were only 11, so of course I was scared, but I agreed stupidly. We went to sleep, and I swear I kept hearing tapping noises on the window, like someone was tapping an object on the window. Me and Alex got up and went into this small entry leading into the woods. Alex showed me the abandoned building, climbing through a broken window. Right off the bat, I could catch a horrible odor coming from the upstairs. Alex noticed it too, but said we should just cover our noses and continue exploring. We got to the upstairs, and Alex was pretty excited about doing this, while me, on the other hand, was creeped the hell out. Alex wanted to go to the room where the odor was coming from. He opened the door and realized the smell was coming from the closet. I begged him not to go in there. When he opened that door, my heart stopped. There, in that closet, was a rotting corpse. 3 broken beer bottles and dirty-looking shirts and socks. We literally sprinted faster than I ever have out of those damn woods. We decided to call the police, even though we would probably get in trouble for breaking and entering, but that doesn't even matter anymore. The police got there with a search team and some other people. I don't really remember, but I sure have a story I'll be telling to my future kids. Oh man, that is so creepy and gross and awful. Are you kidding me? Be careful with abandoned places. places, friends. You just don't even know who takes advantage of those places. There could be people squatting, there could be corpses in closets. Just don't do it. Lesson learned. Moving on. Here we go. I rented a condo in Hawaii at the Hilton Turtle Bay on the north shore of Oahu. FYI, you can get a condo for a week on the hotel grounds for cheaper than a 2-day stay at a hotel. I arrived from Cali, put my stuff down, and headed out for the beach. After dark, I came back and eventually went to bed. The main bedroom was upstairs, and as I'm trying to go to sleep, a woman screams at me from a couple feet away, telling me to leave. It was more like, "Get the fuck out." I'm shocked, and I'm rattled a bit, and I say to myself, hypnagogic, or whatever it's called, hallucinations. And I'm trying to make myself go back to sleep, fall asleep, and I get screamed at again a few minutes later. I get out of bed saying to myself, shit, I rented a haunted condo. I then say, I'm not leaving. I've paid for a week. Leave me alone. I won't sleep in your bedroom, but I'm not leaving. The next day, my good friend shows up. I tell him he can sleep in the main bedroom. He gives me a calculating look. So that night, after some fun adventures, he heads upstairs to go to sleep. I sit on the couch watching the news. He comes walking down about 30 minutes later and says I'm a serious dick for not warning him. I innocently ask him what he's talking about. He says some lady was screaming at him upstairs. I crack up, and I tell him he's going to have to sleep on the couch. Wow. I guess you got a little more than you bargained for at that Airbnb there. I think you were way more calm about it than I would be, for sure. For sure. I'd be yelling at the Airbnb folks, being like, why didn't you warn me that this place is crazy haunted, dude? Because that's not right. Anyway, next. So this story and the next few stories are actually stories that I got off a Podscribe from the podcast Monsters Among Us. Again, I really recommend that podcast. It's very cool, and people call in and tell their real stories and experiences that have happened to them. So I'm really liking some of these, and I think you will too. So enjoy. Here we go. Hi, my name is Jesse, and I grew up in a small town in rural North Dakota. And I had some friends that lived on a 3-story old farmhouse out in the country. Big, huge house. And one time, when I was probably 10 or 12 years old, I was spending the night with my friend, and his room was on the second floor of the house. And I woke up in the middle of the night because I had to use the restroom, and I walked out into the hallway and turned to the right. All of a sudden, I had this feeling like I was being watched, and I turned around, and down at the far end of the hallway, there was a woman standing there. Standing. She was tall, lean, wearing a nightgown of some sort with long blonde hair, and she had sort of a bluish aura about her. And we stared at each other for probably 5 or 6 seconds. And then she continued walking down the hallway. It was sort of an L-shaped hallway, and she was going down the shorter end of it toward the stairway. Immediately, I was terrified. I turned around. I ran back to the bedroom. I jumped under the covers, and I hid well into the morning. I didn't So 4 or 5 years go by, and I'm spending the night at their house again. And this time, I'm sleeping on the couch downstairs. And in the middle of the night, I just wake up for no reason, and I'm looking around the house. And all of a sudden, I see this woman coming out from the stairway where I had seen the ghost previously. And it was the exact same woman. Tall, lean, long blonde hair with a bluish aura. And she stood there and she looked at me for a moment, maybe 5-6 seconds. And then she kept walking across the big, formal dining room, and I could no longer see her. And then again, I was just terrified. I covered myself under the blankets and just tried to go back to sleep. I doubt that I slept, but in the morning I never told anybody. I just knew my friend and his parents and brothers and sisters would just make fun of me. Well, years went by, and I had moved away from home, and one weekend my girlfriend and I decided to go back to my hometown to visit. And we decided to stay at this friend's house. And on the drive there, probably a 3-hour drive, I had told her what had happened, and she was the first person I had ever mentioned it to. She kind of thought it was funny. She didn't really, believe it. And I told her that, after the second experience, I never felt comfortable in that house. If I was alone, like everyone else was in the yard or something and I had to go inside, I always felt uneasy. Anyway, we get there and we're chatting around with everybody, and it comes time to go to bed, and we take one of the bedrooms that are upstairs. There's lots of bedrooms in this house because it's huge. Basically a mansion for the day. And in the morning we wake up and there was all sorts of commotion going on down in the kitchen. There had been some other people, some relatives also spending the night, and they're all just excitedly talking about one of the girls had seen a ghost that night. And then she went on to describe it. And my girlfriend starts kicking me under the table. Tell him. And her description of what she saw that night was exactly like mine, to a T. And so I wound up telling my friends, and they had never seen anything. They had never heard anything. But they always felt that there was something strange in the house. And ever since having somebody else sort of confirm what I had seen, I have been a firm believer in ghosts. It's crazy. Yeah. If somebody else saw it too, it makes you feel like you're not crazy. It's cool. She must have been someone that lived in that house, maybe. She didn't want to leave. I don't know. Next. During the last week of April in 2023, I was visiting family in Greer, South Carolina. Greer is in the northwest corner of the state and the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. During the month of April, my dog was fighting a persistent stomach infection, so he was waking me up in the middle of every night to take him outside. I had gotten used to jumping out of bed, grabbing my flashlight, and racing him into our yard so he could do his business and feel better. I passed the time outside, looking at the sky. Greer is far enough away from city lights that you can get a great view of the stars, the planets, and the Milky Way galaxy. But on this one night in particular, in the last week of April, it was overcast, low-hanging clouds were mixing with drifting light fog and misty drizzle. So it was about 3 a.m. My dog was in the yard, and I was standing in the driveway looking west at the shimmering, swirling sky when I noticed something coming into view, heading east, straight toward me. Now, Greer is home to a large airport, so we see planes in the sky and all kinds of weather. But I immediately recognized that this something was not an airplane or a helicopter or a drone or a blimp or a balloon. It was unlike anything I'd seen before. It was a massive silver sphere. It looked like a giant mirror-polished ball bearing just flying through the sky, emitting a red, faint glow. Based on my calculations I did, later I estimate this sphere was about 50 to 75 feet in diameter, and it was flying between 300 to 400 feet above the ground, well below the cloud layer. I got a really good look at it because it flew directly over my head, silently, smoothly, moving in a straight line and at a consistent speed of about 30 miles an hour. It was so close, I was able to illuminate it with my flashlight, one of those powerful so-called tactical lights you see in the infomercials. I can say definitively that it had no wings. There were no windows, no FAA lights, no visible logos or symbols, no obvious control surfaces or means of propulsion. It was most definitely not the planet Venus, a shooting star ball, lightning, or swamp gas. It was clearly a manufactured flying craft of some kind, and it was obviously under intelligent control. The most striking thing about its appearance and the image that will be burned into my memory forever was that red glow it emitted. It wasn't uniform. It didn't glow equally from everywhere on its surface like a light bulb. Rather, the glow seemed to be produced by dark flames that flickered and danced beneath its mirrored surface, sort of how light will shine through the backside of a two-way mirror. It looked like a glowing ember and a campfire. I was able to watch this craft up close for a full minute as it continued to go east before the waves of fog obscured the view. When it was gone, I stood there in the driveway, dumbfounded. I created some digital renders in Photoshop to approximate what I saw and where I saw it. The renders are fairly accurate, but they can't convey the wonder and the awe I experienced witnessing this thing. I wanted to share this story with your listeners because I was recently listening to your podcast and heard a caller describe a UFO that he had seen, also resembling a burning ember. Maybe we both saw the same kind of craft. Or maybe we saw crafts using the same kind of propulsion system. I don't know. I would not be surprised to learn someday that what I saw was a secret military anti-gravity ship, but I would also not be surprised to learn that what we saw was from another planet or another dimension. Perhaps we're not alone, friends. I kind of don't think we are. So many people have seen such similar things and had such similar experiences. It's crazy. Just saying. Anyway, I am calling with my dad's story. This happened about 35 years ago. My dad and my mom had just gotten married, and they were living out in a small town called Gloucester, about 45 minutes from Morehead City, North Carolina. It's a coastal town. My dad was a social worker at the time, and he had a call, and it was this boy. He was being abused, and it was always the same story. There's a ghost in my room. I'm not comfortable. Dad goes and he checks it out. He ends up saying, okay, well, this boy is fed. He's perfectly fine. The house was clean. It's a weird, creepy house, but it's fine enough for nothing to happen of it. Flash forward to about 4 or 5 years after that. My mom and dad are trying to find another rental in the area, and they stumble upon a house that is really nice, and it's been recently renovated. Just new shutters, painted, everything is great with it. They love the house, so they get it. They ended up finding out that the house was the same house that my dad had had the social work call in 5 years prior. They found out because my dad had been waking up in the night, every night, at 2:55 a.m., feeling like someone was choking him, and he's a Christian. So he would pray all of the things that Christians pray in a situation like that, and it would go away. My mom thought he was crazy, obviously, so they ended up leaving the house because a close friend said, you either need to exorcise the room or you need to move out. So they moved out. He was just really interested in what happened to him, and he found out that the lady of the house had hung herself in that bedroom that he slept in with my mom, and that the little boy had slept in from his social work case that he had, and she had hung herself at 2:55 in the morning. And they only know this because she wrote a suicide note, and she had said she was going to kill herself at 2:30. And I just think it's really interesting because he would wake up at that same time feeling like he was being choked. Wow. That is so scary. I'd be moving too. Absolutely moving. So, I guess that little boy must have experienced the same thing, sadly. Wow. Next story. I never met my father-in-law. He passed away 5 years before I met my wife. If he were alive today, he would have 9 grandchildren, including my kids. However, he only got to meet 2 of them in his lifetime. There is a framed picture that my wife keeps on her nightstand next to her side of the bed of him dancing with her when she was 15 or 16. They are both looking at the camera, his head tilted back a little with a larger-than-life smile. It is one of those pictures that brings a smile to your face even if you don't know the person in it. There is a copy of that picture and many similar ones at my mother-in-law's house. They all have the same theme. Him and his contagious smile. By all accounts, he was always the life of the party. He would get people to dance and be cheerful. He was also a devoted family man, and he was thankful that he got to enjoy the time with his 2 granddaughters while battling the disease that eventually took him away. Fast forward 18 years. All of the grandkids are home, including the 2 oldest ones who now live away to attend college. We had a potluck at my mother-in-law's home, and my kids were just thrilled to see their older cousins. Although the age gap between the oldest kid and the youngest is 15 years, they all get along well. And the oldest ones are just sweethearts about playing and entertaining the younger relatives. At my eldest child's insistence, we invited all 9 kids for a sleepover at our house. We ordered pizza and set up a bunch of mattresses and video games for the kids to enjoy in my daughter's bedroom. Of course, no adults were allowed. Just some background information. My house was built in 2014 on empty land, and it was rented out to a couple of families before us, so there's no weird history there. The layout of the house has 3 bedrooms upstairs. As soon as you come up the stairs, there's a master bedroom to the right, and the other 2 bedrooms to the left. If the master bedroom door is open, you get a clear view of our bed as soon as you hit the upstairs landing. Likewise, if you are in my bed, you can see whoever is coming up the stairs. That evening, after the kids shut themselves up in their pajama party, my wife was doing chores while I was watching TV from my bed. I normally close my door when I watch TV, as I'm very conscious about my kids not being exposed to content inappropriate for their age. However, as my wife kept coming in and out of the bedroom, she just left the door open at some point. I'm not sure about the exact time. It must have been 9 or 10 p.m. when I noticed someone coming up the stairs. It was not a shadow. It was not a see-through figure. It was a person with the sound of the steps and everything. As soon as the person got to the landing, I could fully see him and realized it was my father-in-law. My deceased father-in-law. He was not scary or disfigured like a zombie on TV. He looked exactly like the guy in the picture, and he had that smile, that disarming smile. Surprised! I have had my fair share of paranormal encounters. I just stared at him for a while and decided to greet him aloud. "Hello, mister. How are you?" Stupid question. He could have come back with a burn and replied, "Dead." He had that kind of humor for what I've been told, but he said, "I am fine. Thank you. I'm here to visit the kids," he replied, in what I assume was his voice, since I've never met him or seen videos of him. "Okay," I said. He just nodded and moved over towards the kids' bedroom. I did not hear anyone screaming in the bedroom, so I figured that I was the only one who saw him. I paused the show, and I debated whether to tell my wife about what just transpired. She gets really freaked out when these things happen to me, and she's still overly sensitive about her father. However, her supernatural ability is to see right through me, so she could tell that something was up. I decided to tell her straight up what happened. She followed with an avalanche of questions, but she was quite calm about it. I told her what he looked like, what he was wearing, and his demeanor. I also told her that we both had spoken aloud, as far as I knew, and that I heard his voice. It had not been some sort of mental conversation. His lips even moved and everything. Tears began rolling, and as I comforted her, she began crying about her frustration of not being the one who had gotten to see him, since she was his daughter, after all. I had no reply for that, other than to share the genuine feeling that I got from him, that he loved them and watched over them. My wife calmed down after a few minutes, and then went to bed. She asked me not to say anything to the kids or to the in-laws. I was ahead of her in that sentiment. We ended up telling them later, and they all shared stories about how they, at some point or another, felt his presence, but nothing with the certainty that I was relating. I was glad to have met him, and I believe that we would have gotten along very well. I caught a glimpse of the feeling that everyone who knew him shares about him, that he was a kind, warm, fun-loving person. I hope my children, his grandchildren, share those traits and values. I think that's so beautiful and such a nice, warm, lovely story to end on today. I hope you've enjoyed that. I sure did. I always enjoy these stories, but it's nice sometimes when it's just a story about knowing that our loved ones are still with us in some way, instead of just being terrified all the time with these stories.